Hey everyone, it's Sophia. Today I will be talking about virtual college interviews, and I'll be giving you all my tips on how to ace your college interview, especially now that it's online because of COVID. Last year, when I did my college interviews, I had most of them in person, but I had one that was virtual and it was on Skype, and that was my Columbia interview. So, from my experience with that interview, I can share my tips on how to ace your virtual college interview now that I know that every college interview is virtual. And one thing that you should always remember when you're going into your college interview is that this is just another way for college admissions officers to get to know you better on a more personal level. So think about this just as a conversation with the person that's interviewing you, and just be yourself. Like, don't hold anything back about like your true self, your passions. Anything you want to talk about and anything that you're passionate about, you should go ahead and talk about it. Like, just some of my interviews last year were really just me talking about the things that I'm most passionate about. And the interviewers loved that because they could see like the spark in my eyes when I talked about certain things, and they liked that I was my genuine self. So that's really what I recommend after all these tips, is to go in there, be confident about yourself, and just know that this is your true self, and you're showing your true self to that college. One more thing to note is that if you don't get contacted for an alumni interview, it does not mean anything bad for your application. I know plenty of people that have not done interviews that have still gotten into their dream schools. So this might mean that maybe there weren't enough alumni in your area to interview you, or maybe there's just a really large demand for interviews and there's not enough alumni to interview as many students. So don't worry if you don't get any interviews for your dream school. That being said, if you do have the chance to do an alumni interview, I would highly suggest you to do it. So the first thing to know that's important for virtual college interviews is that you should still dress business casual, just as you would in an in-person interview, because I know it might be easy to stay in your pajamas for an interview over Zoom because you're at home, but I would really just highly suggest putting on like a fancy-ish shirt in order for the interviewer to see that you're prepared for the interview. You're putting your best self out there for them, and that's just a great way to show that you are dedicated and passionate about this school. Another thing that is really important for virtual college interviews is that you should try to get the most optimal lighting for your situation. So for some people, this might mean sitting in front of a window for your interview, because this way, since you're not in person, you're only seeing each other through a computer screen. You want to make sure that they see you clearly and that they see your face clearly, because facial expressions and like body movements and like things like that, like your hand movements, things like that, are really important to like show your personality. And even though it is really hard to do it over Zoom, getting good lighting could really help with that situation. Another thing is that you really want to try and do as much research as possible for the specific college. So let's say you have an interview with Duke University. You want to look at Duke's website, look at the specific major like offerings that they have, what you're interested in, things that align with your passions and goals. You want to research about that. So for example, if you're really passionate about dance, you want to look at the dance department's classes, like have specific names of classes that you might want to take in your head. So when your interviewer asks you, like, why Duke, you can mention that specific class. So same thing goes for researching about your specific interviewer. So most times when you are scheduled for an interview, the specific alumni that is going to interview you emails you. So you can research about their profession, and they'll really appreciate in the interview when you bring up things about things that like might not be known to the general public. So like things that you could have seen researching about them or about the specific university. That's really important. So now I'm going to talk about some questions that are commonly asked in many interviews. Last year when I went through this process, I was asked this specific question, multiple times. And that question is, tell me a bit about yourself. And so a lot of people, when they're asked this question, they don't really know exactly how to approach it. And so the way that I like to approach it and the way that I suggest all of you to approach it is, when you think about yourself or when other people think about you, what do they associate you with? So for me, when they asked me that question, I mostly talked about music, my passion for languages, learning languages, and my future goals, which is to go into the medical field. And so obviously I didn't go right into those details, but I prefaced by saying, like, I've been doing music and singing since I was very young. I have a family. Like, you can talk about like things that make you who you are. And so you should think about that beforehand. Like, think about, who am I? Like, what is my life purpose? Obviously, you don't have to go too deep into it because you could answer those questions later on in the interview. But this question is a great way to lead it into like a more conversation type of interview. So like, for example, for one of my interviews that I had, they asked me this question first. And so I started talking about music, and then just so happened that the interviewer was also a musician, and it kind of just went from went into a conversation from there. And so that was really, really helpful for me because I love talking about music and how it's impacted my life and everything. So yeah. Another question that you should prepare is, what do you want to major in? What is your future career goal or passion? And so you should, in this question, when you're answering this question, you should talk about the specific major at that school that they offer, and you should talk about the specific classes that you would like to take within that major. As well as for career goals, you should talk about the extracurriculars that you want to be a part of in order to get to know more about that career and get involved with people in that field. And so a bit of a more general tip, throughout the whole interview, try to keep track of what you've talked about, if you've talked about it enough, what you haven't talked about yet, because at the end of the interview, the interviewer usually asks a question like, would you like to talk about anything else that we missed throughout the interview? So at that point, you can talk about something that you might have missed. For example, like if you really love this extracurricular and you didn't get to talk about it, you can talk about it at that point if you forgot to. So now I'm just going to list off some really, really common questions that are asked at college interviews. And what I would suggest you to do is write these questions down and practice your answers to them, just so you have a general idea of what you might want to say, just so when you get to the interview, you're not like stuck on your answer for the question. So, for example, there are questions like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Where do you see yourself 10 years from now or 20 years from now? So for that question, you might want to talk about your career goals. And be specific. Be as specific as possible. You could say like, I have graduated from med school or grad school, and I'm the founder of my own business, or something like that, whatever you would like to say. Then a lot of people like to ask the question, why this university? For example, why Duke? Why Stanford? So for that question, you really, really want to be specific. So practice your answer for that question too. Some other ones are, what 3 words would your best friend use to describe you? What can you contribute to our college campus? What is your proudest achievement? What's your favorite thing about high school? And what would you like to change about your high school? That's a really cool question, specifically because the reason why they ask that question, I think, is because they want to see how you can change your community for the better. So if there's like a flaw within your school, you can talk about it and talk about like a proponent of like how you would change that issue. So this is a really cool question. You can like think about that. What's been your most challenging course in high school, and how did you overcome the tough material that you needed to learn? That's another cool question because that shows your resiliency, and you should like talk about specific examples with that. So like, let's say like I did really bad on my math test, but I spent hours and hours going to extra help with my teacher, and then I finally overcame that issue. You can also talk about, another question is, what's the most important extracurricular that you've taken part in? So definitely be specific about this one. Talk about the specific reasons why that's your favorite extracurricular and why it's had the most impact on you. Don't just say, I love Model Congress, that's it, and then end it there. You want to make sure that it's like a more like conversation like answer. So make it easy for them to ask questions after you talk about it. So like, let's say, I love Model Congress because I did this really, really cool thing. Then they can ask you a question about that cool thing that you did and why you loved it so much. Lastly, what excites you most about the extracurricular and academic programs offered at our university? So for that, pull out your research because that will be really, really, really helpful. Okay, so once your interview is all done and the interviewer has asked you all of the questions that they wanted to ask you, almost every time they will ask you if you have any questions to ask them. So at that time, you should really try your best to ask specific questions about the university or about the interviewer, and make sure to make it known that you've researched about the university. Don't ask like general questions like what majors are there or how many undergraduates are there at this school, because like that's stuff that you can easily look up on Google. Ask questions more like, what is the nature of the student body on campus? Like, is it a competitive student body? Like things that wouldn't be easily looked up on Google. So like things about their experience at that college. What did you major in? What was your experience with extracurriculars on campus? Did you take part in any extracurriculars? Just things like that they would love to talk about, because when you ask people questions about themselves, they would love to talk on and on about themselves, and talk about their experience at that school and talk about why that school is amazing. So another thing to keep in mind is that some schools ask for resumes for your interview. So obviously they will tell you beforehand to have a resume. So you want to make sure that this is an activities resume. It's not like a normal resume for when you're applying to jobs. It's more of like a college resume. So if you just look up on Google activities resume, they will give you some great examples of that. And so for those resumes, you want to keep it as concise as possible, because when these interviewers are looking at your resume, they're not going to have all the time in the world to read every single extracurricular or job that you had. So you want to keep it like 1 page long, or if you have to, 2 pages, but I would suggest 1 page. And so yeah, Harvard asked for a resume, Dartmouth, UPenn asked for a resume. Out of the schools that I applied to, those were the 3 that asked for resumes. In addition, Harvard asked for 2 SAT subject test scores. But I'm not sure if that changed with the pandemic, because most schools are test optional. But for future years, I'm sure they will be asking for those. So those are all of the tips that I have for today. I hope you all enjoyed this video. And if you're watching this and you have a college interview soon, I wish you the best of luck. And just remember to treat the interview like a conversation. Just try to have a genuine conversation with your interviewer, and they will love that. People love talking to people that they just met and learning about everything that they've done in their life, all their passions, all their goals, and just research as much as you can about your specific interviewer and the school that they're interviewing you for, and practice your answers for the specific questions that I showed you today. You can also look them up on Google, those specific interview questions that are very common in college interviews. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel. I will be moving into Stanford's campus very soon, and I'm really excited about that. So I will definitely upload some content about Stanford's campus, my experience in winter quarter, the classes I'm taking, and things like that. So, bye everyone.